Hey, Chris Voss, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
John, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you for sure. The audience has just heard your bio, which is extensive, incredible. Give them a sense of how.
Well, when you're old, your bio is extensive, right? Because you get a lot of time to pick stuff up.
That's right. That's right. You can count the decades by the paragraphs in your bio, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Give the audience, if they've been living under a rock for the last 10 years, give the audience a sense of how you became one of the world's leading experts in negotiation.
Yeah, well, I studied it. I loved it. I'm coachable. I take initiative and instruction. And because of that, it really helped me rise into the position in the FBI being our lead international kidnapping negotiator. I mean, I loved it. Once I found negotiation as a concept, and it was introduced to me first on a crisis hotline. But, what was empathy, emotional intelligence before we really defined it, and getting through to people in an accelerated way, in a great way for collaboration, and so once I found it, I couldn't get enough of it. And, because it was my unique ability, as Dan Sullivan would say, or something I love doing, the cliche, do something you love, you don't have to work. I was into it. And, I kept developing the skill all the way up through the FBI, and then learning from Harvard and learning from everywhere I could, looking to outside sources. And I think that's one of the keys to getting better at something. Looking outside. The Wright brothers made bicycles. What's the outside perspective? So I stayed after it, and then serendipity, the universe played a role in me teaching negotiation in the MBA program at Georgetown. And continued to refine the ideas there. And then ultimately Harvard, USC, and serendipity got me to cross paths. And, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? And, you're going to find there's some people that are going to outwork me, but not many. You're going to have to work pretty hard to outwork me and my son, Brandon. And then finally connected with Tall Roz, and the book has been a phenomenal success globally for a variety of reasons.
Massive global success. I've read it multiple times, listened to the audiobook. I'm a huge fan. So it's a real treat for me. The audience listening to this is entrepreneurs who have started a company and are not negotiating experts. And on the other side of the negotiation table, when they go to sell their business, is likely going to be someone who negotiates for a living. Yeah. They're either a private equity group expert, they're a corporate development folks. So I'm hoping this can be a bit of a crash course for our audience who, are negotiating what is their biggest asset, most likely. Very emotional. It's like giving away their baby. It's very, very, very fraught for them emotionally. And I'm hoping we can give them a couple of tips and tricks. And I guess the structure I was hoping to take is there's sort of 2 or 3 major levers that happen in one of these negotiations when you sell a company. The first is like, what's the price, right? Like, what is the acquirer offering you? And of course, the business owner wants the highest price and the acquirer wants to pay the least. And so there's some tension there. And then the second is terms. In particular, how much of that cash is going to be paid up front versus has to be earned through some sort of goals in the future that the entrepreneurs sign up for. So I'm hoping we can sort of riff a little bit on those two variables. Like, how do I get a higher price? How do I get better terms? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, you really want better terms before you want the higher price. Like the guys that are across the table from you in this, Carl Icahn, I remember he said this a long time ago. At best, if you settle on a price, at best, you're 65% of the way through the negotiation. And then our Icon caught on to, like, if I give you your price, I'm going to get my terms. And in point of fact, you're probably never going to get your price. Like, I learned that in kidnap bargaining around the world. It didn't matter who I was dealing with on the other side. The other side was always a mercenary. Kidnapper is a mercenary business person. And while I knew how to negotiate a great price, I always knew, like, I give you your price right now. Try and get the money. Just try. I'm going to kill you on the details. And the mergers and acquisitions people are very good at that. They view negotiation very much like, that's why so many of these guys like to play poker. They think it's poker playing, hiding. And in point of fact, that's not great negotiation. That's great negotiation is highly collaborative, where we're putting our cards together to maximize value for both sides. But they think it's poker, so that's great that they should think it's poker. Because if you think it in much larger terms, if you're deferential, if you master the space between yes and no, if you know how to exhaust them with what and how questions, you can gain the upper hand on a poker player really quickly.
Well said. So let's talk about terms as it states to begin with then, and we can get into pricing later. I think there's an old expression in M&A, which is, you set the price, I'll set the terms, which sounds like it might have come from Carl Icahn. I've actually never heard that before. Yeah. But of course, the terms that most entrepreneurs want, it's fair to say, I want all my cash up front. I don't want an earnout where there's a holdback period where I've got to earn the money as a division president in your company. Right. We agree on a price and I want all of it up front. And of course, the other side of the table is saying, hey, I'll pay your price, but you got to earn it. So let's say it's a $10 million deal. I'll give you 3 up front and then you got to earn the other 7. Right. And that's where they get to loggerheads. And so the entrepreneur wants 100% up front. The buyer wants to pay it over time. How do you get through that sort of impasse?
Well, what's your future look like? What are you trying to get on to? In many cases, the real issue with the terms is the restrictions of autonomy. What do the terms look like? And that's a hard thing for an entrepreneur to suddenly become a corporate employee. Like that is often a fate worse than death. So it's not necessarily you get the earnout, but how much are they going to muzzle me? How much are they going to handicap me? How much are they going to restrict me in the process of this earnout? Now, you as an entrepreneur, you're the $1 million thoroughbred, the $1 billion thoroughbred. If you know what it takes for you to be successful, then those are the terms you're looking for in the earnout. Now, are you looking to get out now, or are you just looking to maintain your autonomy? I got another friend of mine, Dan Sullivan, coaches entrepreneurs, which is why I get coached by Dan. He's in strategic coach. Like you as a business owner, are you really looking to retire? Dan likes to say, retirement is an email to the universe to come and pick up the body. Like, what's it going to do to you to retire? If you're really looking to be put out to pasture, the statistics say you're going to be dead within a year, which is why retirement is an email to the universe to come and pick up the body. So what's the earnout really look like? Right.
I guess most people get to a point where they want to de-risk. So if you're an entrepreneur and you put your life and blood and sweat and tears into a company and it's become successful, and let's just for round numbers say it's worth $10 million. And that's like all of your assets in the world. You may have a little bit of equity in your home. You may have bought a few stocks along the way, but it's like 90% of your net worth. And you reach some milestone birthday, like you're 50 or 55 or 60, and you wake up and you're like, this is crazy. I'm carrying 90% of my net worth in this company that could go pear-shaped the next day.
Right.
And so they say, I don't want to retire and sit on a beach, but I do want to de-risk this, and I want to feel free. And I don't want to feel beholden to my business. Those are the terms that they're looking for.
Right. And your counterpart on the other side, they're going to come in low. And they're going to come in with restrictive terms because that they don't know any better. And that's the way they've been taught, is most likely it minimizes the risk for them. So first of all, they're going to move on the terms. And they're more likely to move the more collaborative they think you are. And the more deferential you are, the less you openly oppose what they say, it takes the wind out of their sails. You can turn a win-lose negotiation, a combative negotiation, into a collaborative negotiation if you simply refuse to participate in the combat. which is what the design of a deferentially phrased what and how questions are. And what and how questions are, look, how does that meet our mutual goals? The most famous how question of all is to test the other side, is to say, how am I supposed to do that? Like, it's the first phrase in the first story, Never Split the Difference, is the application of how am I supposed to do that? Now, here's what's going to happen when you ask, how am I supposed to do that? It's going to get them to stop and think. That every time. The answer is not as important as the thought process you just put them in. You put them into deep thinking. It's exhausting. The secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. So you're asking a how question, first of all, for its mental impact. Now, secondarily, 9 times out of 10, they're going to adjust the terms on the spot, or they're going to start a collaborative process to adjust the terms or the price on the spot. Now, as I said, this was a test. Now, 1 time in 10, they're going to fire back at you because if you want the deal, you'll do it. All right, you just got some great data back. What you wanted to find out in the first place is, are they positioning or do they mean it? Without asking that question, but you're getting that answer based on their response. So the what and how questions are designed primarily for implementation. And the what question is designed primarily, not exclusively, but primarily to uncover problems. What stands in the way? What's stopping you from making this decision? What's the best way to attack the obstacles that we have to overcome? Principally, but not exclusively, designed to uncover problems, how questions, principally to create collaboration for implementation. And these questions are also exhausting for the other side to hear, and they don't know that you're exhausting them. They feel deferential. There's great power in deference. So in these types of negotiations, sort of your first way to get space between yes and no is to start with how and what questions.
Interesting. And occasionally, I guess, they'll throw it back to you, and maybe it's some, like an overly arrogant private equity group partner who's having a bad day, and he or she kind of retorts and says, well, that's your problem. You got to figure out how to, I'm sure it's rare, but occasionally it must happen.
It does happen. I would say about 10% of the time. How do you prep for that 10% of the time?
Yeah.
First of all, you got to get yourself in that position to begin with. And then there's some mental rehearsal involved. Like if somebody slams it back in my face, and they have, I find a way to ask the same question with a different tone of voice. And you can practice this. Practice emphasizing each way to deliver it. Like, how am I supposed to do that? And you can say it again, how am I supposed to do that? I mean, you can change the meaning and make it land differently every time. And every time you throw it at them, it feels deferential, but you're actually engaging in the long game where you're wearing them down. And they don't know that you're wearing them down. You want, in the M&A guy space and the buyout space, private equity space, let them make their bonus on somebody else. You want to be highly collaborative and highly deferential, and you want to make a great deal where both sides prosper. And by and large, they're going to be looking more at short-term gains where you're offering a better deal that they haven't discovered. And they're poker players, and you're a superior player by being collaborative no matter what they do, and deferential.
Chris, would you, if there were certain terms that were deal breakers for you, for example, oftentimes we hear from entrepreneurs, I will not do an earnout under any circumstances whatsoever. I will not do an earnout. Or, they must hire all of my employees. When I sell my company, if they're not prepared to take all of my employees, I will not sell my company. Like if they have a hard line in the sand, would you coach them to reveal that, to kind of get to whether there's a deal there early in the negotiation?
No, I mean, you want to get there, but you want to make the other side work to get there. I mean, the more you try to shortcut the process, the more you actually whet the other side's appetite for more. So you want them to feel like they earned everything they got. And if you know you got some boundaries and it comes up, you start by asking a hard question. How am I supposed to transfer a successful organization to you if you're going to get rid of the people that made it successful? I mean, a term to the other side adjusts when it costs them. Now, you've got a well-oiled machine that gave it the value that you currently have it on the table for. Now, they don't care that you're loyal to your employees. They don't care you've been to their kids' birthdays. They don't have any of the personal relationships. None of that matters to them. They're not invested in it. They are, however, invested in a successful operation. So if their term of change is going to cost them money, now you've got their attention. Like, I don't care that you're godfather to your secretary's grandchildren. I do care how well this company is going to function without that secretary, or without that executive assistant, or without that chief of staff. Like, changing out employees is expensive, more expensive than keeping on the people who know what they're doing. And that's your reason for getting them to take a look at hanging on to the employees. Like, they don't care that you have emotional attachments to them. They're attached to the efficiency of the organization. And empathy is about understanding what it looks like to the other side and getting out of your own way, and then phrasing a term that they need to give you because it's in their interests. And many of these terms, like, especially, keeping on employees, the reasons for that, to get them to change their mind, is if not doing it costs them. And that'll get their attention.
One of the toughest ones is the earnout piece, because they have the ultimate rebuttal, which is, again, you say, look, the entrepreneur will say, I don't want an earnout. I want 100% of my cash up front. And the other side will often respond and say, how am I supposed to do that? In other words, if you're going to leave the next day, we can't capture the value that we're buying here. We need you to help us in this transition. We need you to kind of make sure that you continue to grow this business. So we need to guarantee that you're going to be around in 5 years. So that's why we got to put 60% of the value that we're going to pay you in some future payment. And they have this, it can be a very persuasive, and I think entrepreneurs feel in some way almost like, oh, geez, when you say it that way, I guess you're right. I probably should agree with an earnout. Like they feel broken down by their argument. Can you suggest ways they might use mental judo to rebut it?
Yeah, well, again, exploring the space between yes and no. Like, you got to know from the other side, do they mean it? Do they have, other than their argument, like, do they mean it? Or are they just asking for more because they're expecting to land closer to you? And if you got a bet, we live in a Las Vegas world. You're placing your bets. What's most likely? I happen to live in Las Vegas, but I've been using this analogy for years. If you had to bet, they're asking for more than they're willing to settle for, because that's the way they're used to doing business the quickest. So you got to know where their lines really are. Their how and what questions are a great way to get there. Another Black Swan skill to master the nuance of is the label. Because again, you're exploring the space between yes and no. So they've laid out the argument for you. It appears that the argument is clear. However, there's always stuff they left out. And so the label seems like you've given this a lot of thought. And then the critical moment is what we call shut up. You lay a label out and you got to go dead silent. You got to go Elon Musk dead silent. Like, I'm a fan of both Elon Musk and Lex Friedman. Listen to one of Elon's interviews. But, he's been on like 4 times, and there's a famous point in time. You ask Elon a question, you got to sit there and shut up while it bakes in his brain. And one of the questions he asked, Elon was dead silent for 22 seconds. Now, most people can't stay silent for a second. And 3 seconds seems like an eternity. And Elon sat there for 22 seconds. Like, try counting that out. Look the next time in one of your conversations when somebody says something to you, and I challenge you to go dead silent for 2 seconds without bursting into flames. But a good label, you got to go dead silent. You got to go Elon Musk dead silent. And you got to let it bake into the other side's brain. And you got to wait for them to respond. And you throw out a good label after they've just made a great case, which most likely is rehearsed. And most likely there's more to it. You're seeing the tip of the iceberg on their thinking. They're looking for collaboration. They're looking for you to help them think. They're looking to explore the space between yes and no. A simple label, seems like you've given this a lot of thought, is the perfect label to find out what's really going on. And you got to wait for the other side to react. I mean, there's a lot more to labeling, but that's one of the most effective labels that are almost I can't think of a circumstance where it's not an appropriate response to be a phenomenal information gathering move on your part to explore the space between yes and no.
I love that. And it also puts the ball back in their court without giving anything up from your side. It's back in their court. And it also buys you some time to reflect and think and process yourself, which...
all of those things. And one of the critical things is it puts it back in their court in a way that they don't feel coerced or cornered by. Now, you've kind of left them in a position where they're probably going to open up to you, but they're not going to feel like they have to. Like, a question causes people to feel like they have to respond. And some people don't like to be made to feel like they have to respond. And consequently, since they don't like it, they won't. But there's something about the way a label hits the brain that just draws people out in a way that's almost impossible to resist.
One of the dirty little secrets of negotiating the sale of a company, purchase of a company actually, is something called retrading, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Retrading happens when there's an agreement in principle. Everybody agrees, and they often sign a letter of intent, which is a relatively formal document. This is, we're going to pay you, $10 million for your company, and we're going to take all your employees, and the deal's going to close on this date. Everybody agrees that's great. There's going to be a period of due diligence where the acquirer, looks into and confirms everything you said in the part of, the sale process. And then there's going to be a day where the deal closes. And miraculously, out of thin air, out of the blue, 2 days before closing, the acquirer calls up and says, geez, I thought we were going to pay $10 million for your business, but we found a few things in diligence, and now we're only going to pay $7.5 million. And retrading, in my experience, happens in this world for 2 reasons. One's legitimate, the other is illegitimate. Legitimate is they did find something, and you did lie or fib or embellish something, and that's legitimate if they found that. However, illegitimate retrading is they do it because they know you're mentally committed to the deal, right? They know that you bought the ski chalet or the vacation property. You've told your spouse and your kids, and now you don't have a back. You're committed. And I'm most interested in the illegitimate retrading. What would you coach, or how would you coach an entrepreneur who believes that they are being illegitimately retraded against?
Well, first off, hit them with, sounds like you got a reason for saying that. I mean, even if they gave you the reason, you want to go back and you want to plow this ground again for exactly the reason that you just said. You need to know whether it's legitimate or illegitimate. Is it a tactic? Is there a tactic going on here? Be happy to discuss it. Again, this is a space between yes and no when you're trying to find out what's really going on with the other side. You need to find out whether or not this is legitimate or not. And this is an ongoing test of your ability to simply not get caught off guard. So you want to be willing to dig into it. Be genuinely curious. I mean, be open to the conversation. Because they got deadlines too. You know, they've made promises with the other side. Their time is banging on them just as hard as it's banging on you because they don't get their bonus if they don't close. So it's not that you're disadvantaged here. They've been telling people about closing this deal too. They've been planning on moving on to another negotiation. They've got their own deadlines. They got other projects they want to work on. If very deferentially you calmly get into this and are happy to explore to find out whether or not it's legitimate. You know, there's a whole variety. It sounds like you got a reason for saying it. Sounds like your diligence process isn't very effective. Sounds like I should be prepared for you to uncover more objections. Sounds like you didn't approach this that thoroughly to begin with. You know, the way I put the inflection on each one of those at the end is a genuine curiosity. It's not an accusation. Like, are you telling me that this is your first rodeo? You know, an oriented question, which is a variation of another skill. As long as you maintain deference and curiosity and patience becomes your weapon, then their illegitimate retraining at the last minute begins to work against them because they didn't expect that. You know, they've been taught they can come in with this tactic, the last minute, let me drive some more concessions at the table. The other side's going to give in. They're going to freak out. They're going to get rattled. You know, I got the upper hand. They got the upper hand only if you give it to them. What happens if you don't give it to them? What happens if you let them keep the illusion of control? If you maintain deference and curiosity. And again, you don't say yes, you don't say no, you don't reject anything. What you're doing is you're finding out whether or not it's legitimate or not and something you got to fix, or whether it's simply a tactic.
And if they reveal themselves to be a tactic, how would you respond?
I'm just going to say, how am I supposed to make those changes? You know, how am I supposed to rely on what you're saying? You know, how do I know this is ever going to go through? I'm still hitting them with labels and what and how questions. And I'm not going to get rattled. And I'm going to let them to carry the deal forward because they've made the same promises to people on their side that you're likely guilty of yourself. Don't take yourself hostage. They're human beings. They're counting their bonuses. They got obligations to their boss. They're this deep into this. They got to make the deal too. Let time be their problem.
You mentioned don't get rattled a few times. And for entrepreneurs, they find this really challenging because for many of them, their business is their baby. It's like the closest thing to their child as there can be. And when the other side of the negotiation table says, yeah, we were going to pay X, but now we're going to pay X minus 20%. They take it as a personal attack. Like, you've just told me my child is ugly and I'm not going to take that from you. Right. You promised me, you little fill in the blank. And they get emotional because it's their child. Yeah. How do you coach people to stay objective and avoid getting emotional in a negotiation?
That's a great question. There's kind of three parts to this. All right, so you're talking about stuff that's eminently predictable. So going into the process, imagine it's going to happen. You know, be Michael Jordan, be Tiger Woods, be the best athlete in whatever sport you happen to follow, be Tom Brady. How do these guys deal with it when it happens in the moment? They've thought about it in advance. And then instead of imagining themselves getting rattled, they imagine themselves staying cool. You know, you can run the movie in your head however you want. And however you run it in your head is how it's going to happen. And I heard this referred to a long time ago as visioning, something that great athletes, all the great athletes do. They envision the moment coming, but they don't envision themselves giving in to their amygdala. What they do is they envision themselves staying calm. They envision themselves staying curious. They envision themselves reacting calmly. So curiosity in its purest form is a superpower. Curiosity is cited in non-negotiation books as a superpower, as the verse says. Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, and he says, he coined the term anti-fragile as things that gain from stress and trauma and disorder. He calls it post-traumatic stress growth. Instead of PTSD, it's PTSG. And he says curiosity is a superpower that helps you grow from trauma and disorder. Man's search for meaning. Curiosity is cited, and I wish I could tell you the author's name off the top of my head when I'll remember his name when we get off. But he was a guy that was in a concentration camp.
Viktor Frankl, wasn't it?
Yeah. He discovered that curiosity was a great survivor's skill. Like, it was so horrific to be there. As soon as he saw people step back and go like, I'm kind of curious as to what horrific thing's going to happen next. He saw those people survive psychologically even better. So you start finding curiosity and showing up in different aspects of the universe that it becomes a superpower. So imagine yourself staying curious. Now, and then practice it in your day-to-day interactions. You get interactions that set you off every day with your significant other, with your kids, with your colleagues, you know, with the guy at the dry cleaning store that asks you a stupid question. These are the small stakes practices to stay curious and to just be amused. You know, I had a friend of mine once told me his father said, don't let them anger you, let them amuse you. There's a certain amount of practice that goes on here. So the preparation and the practice staying curious in your other small stakes interactions. This is a predictable interaction. Imagine yourself reacting calmly in the moment. And then finally, when the moment comes, that's the time for the late night FM DJ voice. Now, I use that on myself when I get rattled in the middle of a negotiation, principally to calm the other side down. But me forcing myself to use that voice calms me down. And I use it as an override tool for my anger in the moment, even more so than the impact it's going to have on the other side. And it's going to have a great impact on the other side. So the secondary benefit is it calms things down. The primary benefit is it calms me down. And those are kind of the three stages to getting prepared for when the other side says, not only is your kid ugly, but your kid is stupid.
Visualize, be curious, and implement the late night FM DJ voice. I love it. Yeah. You had the FBI task force, I think, for hostage negotiation. Am I getting that right?
Well, it's close. I was on a joint terrorist task force in New York City, which involved always, of course, hostage takings. And then I was also a hostage negotiator. So it's overlapping missions. Hostage takings often involve terrorists. So you can see how that's two different entities with overlapping missions.
Yeah. Let's talk about the actual price of a company. So there's two schools of thought, I think, that come up. You know, there's one school of thought that says, look, you never state your price, right? You're putting a ceiling onto which you'll ever sell your company for. The market, it's not like you're buying a car where there's a relatively predetermined price range that the car is available for. Or when you buy a house, you can look up other houses in the market on that street and you go, yeah, it's probably within this range. With a business, it's really in the eyes of the acquirer. And so there's a school of thought that says, never name your price. You might be surprised. And if you actually do name your price, you're putting a seal onto which you will ever sell your business for. There's another school of thought that says, I'm just going to go in high, right? Like if I want 10, I'm going to ask for 20. And then I'll negotiate down to 10. I'll be happy. I'll get what I want. What's the right way to approach this, getting your best price?
I think going in high drives more deals away, creates more animosity than pulling a price out of the other side does. And I'm going to be really explore a lot of information before I actually, a number comes out of my mouth. The person you're negotiating with has put a lot of effort into what they think the price should be. If you can tell yourself you're not going to take yourself hostage, like not only do I want to know what their range is, I want to know their range in point of fact too. Because people are much more open to talking about ranges than if you ask for a specific number, the chances are that they're going to come in with a number that's at the extreme end of the range that favors them. I want to know the range. I want to know where they're getting their data. I want to know what their thought processes are. And I'm going to get into it with you, what you think the numbers should be before I ever throw a number out. I'm very much a strong believer in letting the other side name price first because I want to explore it. And I practice not letting an extreme anchor suck the life out of me. You know, the phrase, Mike Tyson phrase, everybody's got to play until they get hit. You know, that gets translated into negotiations that you're not prepared for an extreme anchor. I had one of the students in my class at Georgetown. I'm teaching MBA part-time students. What does it mean if you're a part-time MBA student? It means you're a business person that has a full-time job and a family. And you're in a negotiation class at night because you're a go-getter, but you got a job. And I was teaching them to use the skills in their day-to-day businesses. And one of them wrote in one of the papers, getting hit with an extreme anchor is like watching a vision disappear in front of your eyes. Because he made himself vulnerable to a high number. Now, the other side wants you to do that. Again, this is eminently predictable. You want them to go first. They're going to come in with a number you're not going to like. You imagine yourself telling yourself, that's an exploratory number. That's a test. They know it's a test. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to start talking about, sounds like he gave this a lot of thought. This magic label again. Let me start testing what's their criteria. Did they calculate the number based on the signs of the zodiac, the kid's birthday, and what time they got out of bed that morning, which is most likely? Or if they got something really solid they're sticking to. Let's talk about how you got that number. Let's talk about how that number plays out. Let me talk about maybe I can get some magic terms that end up making that number a great number. If I give them their number, this whole bit about getting the other side's hopes up over a number, there's a pretty good chance they're doing that too. If I give you your number, I may just have terms that make it worth 10x for me in the long run. So it's a combination effort, and practice not getting rattled over the number being an extreme anchor designed to dishearten you. Practice not getting disheartened. It's just a number. It's just a gambit on their part.
How do you know when an extreme anchor is just a negotiation ploy versus a real number that they're not willing to budge off of? I think I've heard you refer to it in a previous interview as proof of life. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that concept.
Well, proof of life is a separate issue than the numbers. And really, like if they throw a number at me that's catching me off guard, I've rehearsed in my head enough times to say, how am I supposed to do that? That it's second nature. And I practice it all the time. And there is a lot of practice. And you'd be surprised the number of times you imagine yourself saying, how am I supposed to do that? The number of times you look in a mirror and say it out loud. it wires your brain to do that in the moment. All you got to do is wire your brain to do it in the moment. Now, the response to how am I supposed to do that is always a massive amount of data. Like they're gonna soften, they're gonna dodge, they're gonna move off to the other side, they're gonna provide some explanation, or they're gonna come back at you like a fastball right straight at your cranium. And that's when they come back at you hard and fast and instantaneous, it's not a gambit on their side. It's legitimate. Now, you might not like the answer, but you got the answer. Going from wondering to knowing always leaves you better off. You need to know whether or not this is a hard number or whether or not they're just throwing a number because they're looking for flexibility. Now, it might be a hard number, but you're much smarter knowing that, getting the answer to that particular question before you move on. Going from wondering to knowing always makes you smarter.
Well said. So that's important for me to understand the difference between sort of digging a little deeper behind what you perceive to be an extreme anchor and this idea of proof of life. Maybe walk through proof of life then. What do you mean by that?
Well, proof of life comes up much more as, are they ever going to make the deal with you at all? And that's much more in an opening conversation. I mean, you can establish, is there a deal and is the deal with you? In the early conversations, are they feeling you out? Are you a competing bid? Are you somehow, is your situation simply a ploy to be used against somebody else when they don't expect to ever close with you? Proof of life is designed around that. Is there a deal and is the deal with you? Oftentimes there is a deal. The deal just isn't with you. And I've heard salespeople say, if somebody calls you and they want a quote, you got a live buyer on your hands if somebody's really focused on a price. And the nuance to that is they're a live buyer, but they ain't buying from you. They're driving at a quote because they're trying to drive the price down on somebody else. So yes, they're a live buyer. There is a deal. The deal is just not with you. And that's what proof of life is about, finding out whether or not the other side's serious about doing business with you, which also in the buyout process early on, somebody wants to buy your business. Your legitimate question is like, why my business? I mean, why are you interested in me? I mean, I got competitors. There are plenty of other people out there that you could buy. Why do you want to buy me? Their answer tells you what their value proposition is, what matters to them, which then is extraordinarily useful on down the line. When they're trying to kick the legs out from under you over the value of your business, you can say, like, look, when we first started talking, this is what you told me the value of my business was. How does that stack up with what you're telling me now? That's that how question, which is very deferential. So even though the proof of life per se might not be an issue, there is a value proposition issue there, which is going to be extraordinarily useful to you down the line in their opening conversation with you when you're doing proof of life. They don't see it as a negotiation. They actually see it as them selling you on whether or not they should be your partner. And it gives you massively valuable information to use when they think you're in a negotiation, but actually you've been negotiating with I think the opening word in every negotiation is hello.
Nice. I'd love to ask you one last question before I let you go. And it relates to the difference in the kind of power struggle. When we were chatting offline, I described it as a bit of a David and Goliath battle in the sense that these entrepreneurs are great at what they do, but they don't have a lot of experience negotiating the sale of their company. They do it once and that's it. And on the other side of the negotiation table, they have people who have gone to your Georgetown course, I'm guessing, people that are really sophisticated negotiators.
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you for a second because a well-practiced negotiator doesn't necessarily make a sophisticated negotiator.
Okay. Tell me more about
that. Well-practiced is they're used to doing, it's like physics under Newton, Newtonian physics. Yeah, you can do pretty well under the old rules, But there's just some basic bare knuckle bargaining that makes you a C student. Maybe even in some cases a B student. But to become really sophisticated is when you start blending the tactical advantages of emotional intelligence in. When you realize that deference puts you in a position of immense influence and power. The curiosity is superpower. Very few people in the space you're talking about have developed the skills to that level. And so you could be more sophisticated than they are in the application of emotional intelligence when they may have been doing it a lot. They just weren't doing it that well.
Well said. And that gives our listeners a sense of confidence to move forward. They're all emotionally intelligent because they lead people and then they negotiate other things all the time. So they've got to flex that muscle. For folks who want to learn more, I mean, you've got obviously Never Split the Difference is a global bestseller. You'd have to be living under a rock if you haven't heard of it, but it's an incredible book. You got the masterclass you teach at some of the world's best universities. You've also got a newsletter, which I love, all about negotiating. Talk a little bit about the newsletter and how people can get it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the best thing about the newsletter is it's actionable and it's concise. Like I used to get the daily 10-point briefing from the Wall Street Journal, and it exhausted me to try to work my way through that. Like, which of the 10 do I want to pick? If I pick it, that wears me out. And then if I read that article, like I gotta go take a nap. Like it doesn't prep me for the day. It exhausts me. So our newsletter is a concise and actionable article. It comes out once a week and it is not exhausting. It's never more than 1,000 words, so usually between 500 and 1,000 max, which is page and a half of actionable, usable information. The secondary benefit of the newsletter, and like the third benefit, is it's complimentary, so it's not going to cost you. But it's actionable, it's usable, and then it actually starts putting you in a position where you learn about the different training products we have. What's your next step in your journey? Do you need help right now where you might need coaching from us? You might want coaching from us to coach you through the deal, and we coach people. Or you may want to jump into a journey where these tools are so much fun to use, you want to apply it across the board. Subscribing to the newsletter gives you indicators. It's the gateway to everything we have. It's the gateway to our website. It's the gateway to our products. It's just like the best place to get started. So wherever you are now, and if your hair is on fire, you want to be coached. If you got a little bit of time, maybe you want to be coached through this deal, but you want to study some more. We're going to be able to help you find that in the newsletter, The Edge. You go to our website, blackswanltd.com. And if you don't get a box to sign up right away, it's in the upper right-hand corner. There's past articles. You can work your way through to find something that's applicable to you now. You can sign up, and if you sign up, you get it emailed to you on Tuesday morning, which means usually you got Monday behind you, and you're ready to get into it on Tuesday.
The website is blackswanltd.com. The newsletter is The Edge. I will put all those in the show notes at builttosell.com. Chris, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, John, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.